Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Play Pause Rewind. It feels like it's been a while since we've recorded, but it hasn't been any longer than usual. We've just done a lot of stuff, but
it's
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 been a
been a
busy
very
couple
busy
weeks for
time.
us. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
very busy.
Lots of exciting things in our personal lives, but not our business to share on the show necessarily. But how have you been the last couple weeks, Niles?
I've been good. The colors are changing outside. The temperatures are dropping. It's always nice to just enjoy a pleasant fall.
Mhm.
But I'm excited to talk about the film we got on deck for today. But Dylan, what about you? How have you been these past few weeks?
Pretty good. Spent some time up in the mountains, and I'm also enjoying fall. But I think today was the day my AC gets shut off for the season, so it's
Mm.
gonna be a little rough for a little bit there, but we'll survive. But yeah, pretty good overall. Had a long weekend. We had Indigenous Peoples Day off today from work, which was nice. Happy
Oh,
Indigenous Peoples Day, 2 days late for our audience. So
yeah.
that was nice.
Lucky you. I did not have it off.
Yeah, well, maybe someday. But
Yeah.
we are going to talk about the film Don't Worry, Darling. And the way
Hmm.
we usually do non-spoilers and then spoilers, but what we're going to do this time is non-spoilers, and then we're going to talk about the drama around this movie.
Ooh, the
Um,
drama.
because I think for the most part it's pretty funny. Uh well, it's at least comical. Maybe it's not funny. I'm sure it was really aggravating to a lot of people involved. And then we'll do
Hmm.
non-spoilers after that. So I didn't want to like start with the drama discounting the movie. I think we should talk about it a little bit first, and then we can do the like spill the tea before we go into spoilers.
Oh yes, I need to know what is the tea, mama. But it's an interesting one because like the film is itself is I think it's a good film overall. And just the drama around this film has just kind of like dominated the headlines around it,
Yeah, it
which has
dominated the
created
conversation for sure. And
yeah,
it got the film itself got a relatively middling response from people, both in the festival circuit and in theaters.
yeah.
So it for a lot of people, they felt like, oh, there's so much drama. It wasn't worth it for this movie. It's like that's not how drama works, guys. But to start off, it's directed by Olivia Wilde, and it was written by Katie Silberman with a story by Carrie Van Dyke and Shane Van Dyke. Stars Florence Pugh, Harry Styles, Chris Pine, Nick Kroll, Olivia Wilde, Kiki Lane, and Gemma Chan. And we're basically following Alice, who is a 1950s housewife, and her husband Jack in a seemingly idyllic little 1950s desert town. But it's very strange as well. Something is going on, and we're not really sure what or why. And
Hmm.
that's sort of how it kicks off. And it is tough to talk about any specifics, even theme, without diving into spoilers. So it's going to be
Yeah.
kind of this first bit's going to be a little bit light. But what are your overall thoughts on it?
I liked it. Overall I definitely enjoyed this film. We'll talk about it a little bit more once we get into spoilers because I do have some gripes with this
Hmm.
film. Like I don't I think, aside from the drama, like the trailers and like anything I'd ever seen about this film before we went to go see it this weekend, I think it was definitely hyping it up to be this very, very clever, thought-provoking, strange film.
Hmm.
And I'm not entirely 100% sold on the delivery of it. I think there's like
Okay.
kind of like there's some good opportunities in there, and they definitely delivered a lot on the commentary that they wanted to strike
Hmm.
throughout the film. But I think that there's just some moments where they didn't go as far as they should have. They just it's yeah, I think it's just got a few like kind of shortcomings, but overall I think it's a really good film, and it's got a very stark commentary to share with the world as well. But yeah, Dylan, what about you? What are your initial thoughts on Don't Worry, Darling?
Yeah, I overall had a good time with it. I like the set design a lot. I think the 1950s vibe of the whole movie was really well done, and it did feel like this, like it felt like a 1950s advertisement for a desert resort. And I think they
Yeah.
really nailed that aesthetic. And there's like a big party scene with lots of dancing and people at tables and drinking and singing, and just that entire scene was so like fun
Hmm.
and scary at the same time. It's a little spooky at that point in the movie, but I liked all that. I thought the performances for the most part were really good. I except for Harry Styles, no hate for the guy, but he didn't do a great job. They weren't doing him any favors by pairing him up against the significantly more talented in the realm of acting Florence Pugh in
Yeah.
basically all of his scenes. Um, because like I don't know, that's like holding up like your pretty good painting to a professional's painting. Like it's just not going to work. It's
True.
he's not as developed as an actor as most of the other people in this movie, and that shows. That could change over time, but I didn't think he was distracting though. I kept hearing from people that he was distractingly bad in the movie, and I didn't get that. Did you?
No, I think that there's moments where he's a little stiff.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of just chalk that up to like the kind of the ominous nature of the town. Like he
Yeah.
can't reveal too much information and all that stuff. So it's like, I didn't think he was really distracting, but I do kind of agree with you there about his performance. It isn't as, strong as Florence's. And,
Mm-hmm.
I think he's got a little bit of like, you know, acting skills to still, strengthen as
Yeah.
time goes on.
And I mean,
Because
it's
he's still
not.
kind of new to it.
Yeah, he's only been in like 2 movies, I think, and one of them was
Hmm.
Dunkirk, where he basically didn't speak. So,
Hmm.
I did think it did seem like he was drifting between an American and British accent for a lot of the movie, and I thought it was him trying to hide his British accent for the longest time, and then they say his character's from Britain, and I'm like, oh, okay, I get maybe that's just what his
Yeah.
voice sounds like. I don't know, but I don't want to dwell on him too much. I don't want to just like have this be a shit on Harry Styles parade. That's not what I'm
Oh yeah.
intending to do. But
Absolutely.
and I did like the themes of this movie. I think maybe they were a little too blunt to the point where maybe it can be eye rolling for some people, but I don't care. I'm fine with it. I'm
Yeah.
fine with the using the targets of this movie's commentary as you know, storytelling punching bags a little bit. I think it's funny.
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, it's still a fun overall movie,
Mhm.
like even though I don't think it necessarily lived up to my expectations, I had a great time watching it. And, there's still a lot of neat little things to like pull out of this film. Like,
Mhm.
like even just like we only watched this like 2 days ago, and I'm still like thinking about it from time to time and thinking, oh
Yeah.
wow, I can't believe I missed that point, or like,
Mhm.
X, Y, and Z. So but yeah, the great set design overall, like the aesthetic of this movie is so cool and just nostalgic for the 1950s, which is really neat, and it definitely fits in with the commentary that they're going
Mhm.
for, especially considering just how um, um, male centric and male dominated the 1950s
Patriarchal,
were.
yeah.
Yeah, patriarchal. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and I thought the costumes were all really good too. I didn't mention that.
Hmm.
I love the cars, and I love the artificiality of the whole thing. Like, not a spoiler, but early on there's a scene where all the men are going to work and they all pull out of their driveways at the exact same time. And all the wives are waving goodbye at the exact same time.
Yeah.
And they're all driving out in the desert together to go to their office.
Yeah.
And it was just I love the like I don't know. It felt like a staged musical because a lot of it probably is staged, as we'll talk about, but it's fun. I like the vibes. And then it gets creepy, which is fun too.
Yes, yeah, because yeah, as time goes on, Alice starts to become a little bit more suspicious.
Hmm.
Weird things are happening. She's seeing hallucinations. She's seeing some weird things, and it just gets kind of more uncomfortable as time goes on. And it all kind of ultimately boils down to Project Victory and Frank here in this strange little town.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's got a nice tone to it. Yeah, and overall, I think it's a cool film.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think another great performance was Chris Pine. I thought he was awesome.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Yeah. I think just across the board, all the performances were pretty good. You know, I think if there's one person that kind of took me out of it for a moment, it was Nick Kroll's character. Like just
Is
because
that
like
just because he's Nick Kroll though, and he was in the
it
lead?
is. It is. And, like it's just like whenever I see him on screen or I hear his voice in like any animated show, I'm like, it's Nick Kroll. It's him. I know it's him.
It's
like,
Ruxin from the League, the shittiest person of all the shitty people.
It's like I can't unsee it or stop paying attention to it. It's just there. Like,
yeah. I thought he was good in this too.
Yeah.
Performance wise. Yeah. It's distracting because we watched the League back after college, but
yeah. Well, and like Nick Kroll usually isn't in like these kinds of dramatic roles. It's more like comedic roles, you know.
Yeah.
So
he's in some dramatic roles, but like smaller background characters.
Yeah.
But okay, do you wanna talk drama for a little bit? Should we?
Drama, let's talk about it.
All right. So gonna do this really quick. But
yes,
I think this is comically absurd, and also should say, I think most of this is just hearsay at this point, so big grain of salt.
Yes.
But let's get started. So it all began with Shia LaBeouf leaving the project for two reasons. One, he apparently felt the cast wasn't getting proper time for rehearsing, and he felt like they weren't going to make a good movie because of that. But also, more importantly, he has allegations of like domestic abuse and sexual battery against him at the moment, and Florence Pugh expressed discomfort at working with someone like that. Very understandable. So whether it was both of those or either of those, I don't know, but he left the project. But then Olivia Wilde apparently still wanted this to work. She wanted him to come back, and there was like a leaked video call of her talking to Shia LaBeouf about how like this might be a good lesson for Miss Flo, like seeming very dismissive of Pugh's like apprehension about working with this guy, especially since the two of them were going to have like a lot of very intimate sexual scenes together. So that came out, and so that's already not great, but LaBeouf does not come back, replaced with Harry Styles, and what apparently happened was on set, Harry Styles and Olivia Wilde started having an affair, and it's unclear whether or not she had already broken up with Jason Sudeikis, who was her boyfriend for a long time, who I think they have kids with. And Florence Pugh is friends with Jason Sudeikis, so that made her uncomfortable as well. Oh yeah, and then you added in here, she got served papers while on stage at CinemaCon, which is not cool necessarily.
It's like my understanding of it too is like, you know, when someone's serving you papers, they can do it at any time. And so I don't think Jason Sudeikis like said right then while she's presenting, it just kind of happened that way. Like the guy was like, "Oh, I'm here."
It's up to
the
server's discretion.
Yeah. And he's like, "All right, now's."
Yeah, because usually they catch you when they catch you because people are avoiding being served as best they can. But I don't know about that part of it, and I don't know about the relationship with Jason Sudeikis or much about him outside of his roles either, to be honest. But
yeah, me too.
From accounts on set, Florence Pugh basically directed a decent amount of the movie herself because Olivia Wilde was otherwise engaged. So then the promotion for the movie starts. Florence Pugh barely does any promoting, including not really doing the press tour at Venice Film Festival. Despite apparently being there. There's that video of her like walking with a drink down the street, which is pretty funny. And then in all those interviews, we see Chris Pine just like looking like he would rather be on another planet than where he is. He's like looking up like this at one point, and he's rolling his eyes as Harry Styles is sitting next to him, describing how this movie just feels like, you know, a movie. His words, not mine. And then finally, it appears that as they're sitting down for the screening of the movie, Harry Styles walks up, and before he sits down, leans over and spits in Chris Pine's lap, and then sits down. Both sides have denied this happened, but I fucking saw that video.
I saw that video too, and that it's so looks like it. Like he just leans over and spits.
Because he leans over, it looks like he spits, and then Chris Pine stops clapping, like looks down at his lap and kind of like it's like huh? It's so strange. And then right before the lights dim, there's a clip of Chris Pine just like putting on sunglasses and leaning back.
gosh, that's so weird.
And that's all the drama. But I think it's what a fucking circus. If even half of that is true, what the hell?
Well, this is also like, I mean, like you said, it's all kind of hearsay at this point. So
Mhm.
it's like it's really difficult to confirm or deny any of this stuff.
Yeah.
And there's so many articles that you can just go click on and just it's a black hole and you'll
Mhm.
just never get out of it. You're just gonna go down a rabbit hole and you'll never leave. But like, even just like some of these like allegations, just kind of like the professionalism of it all. Like
Mhm.
you're literally on a movie set
Yeah.
and you're starting an affair with one of your actors. It's like,
Mhm.
oh god, like I know he's new to acting. Like, and he's a
Well,
really
and he's a
handsome
big
man.
star, but
Yes,
I think what you're alluding to, and I agree with, and we've talked about this before, is that a movie set is a place of work.
yes, absolutely.
It is, if you're in Hollywood in a movie, the set is your office, and if you're the director, you're the boss of that set. And I'm not going to pin this all squarely on Olivia Wilde necessarily, but I do
Yeah,
think as a director, as the person in charge, you don't have business fucking your talent. I think that's inappropriate.
yeah,
It was but inappropriate both ways, but one, as an actor on the director and you're the director, like he is a subordinate, that's not cool. But also it's disruptive to everyone else trying to do their jobs. And unlike
yeah.
the Hollywood talent in there, like, crew's not getting paid enough for that shit. They shouldn't have to deal with it. So
Yes, absolutely.
no
Well,
further shade to anyone involved, but I think that's inappropriate to do. Do what you want on your own time, but that's not chill.
100%, like put the affair on pause until filming is done, and then you guys can go screw your brains out or whatever. Like just
Yeah.
wait until the production is done and then you can have your little fling, like whatever. But
Right.
it's just kind of like that is a little odd that it would
Mhm.
start on set and then it's like the way that these show notes, like, and the way that I've heard about it too, is that it's like, or that the implication here kind of for me is that Olivia Wilde was too busy like with Harry Styles to really do her
Mhm.
job as the director. But maybe I'm
Mhm.
reading into that too
Well,
much.
that's what I heard, but again,
Oh,
hearsay. I don't know if that's the case, but that is what I was reading. And
hmm,
and again, like if Florence Pugh is having to step up and direct, that's changing the entire workflow of the set and giving her more responsibilities and already being the lead of the movie. And Olivia Wilde's acting in this movie too, but she's not the
yes,
fucking lead. Um, and I don't want to dwell on it too much more because we probably gave it more light than it deserved already.
yeah,
But um, yeah, and it's like something happened on this set. Shit went down, obviously, but it's over now at this point.
yeah. There's obviously some tension.
Hmm.
We don't need to talk about it any more than that because ultimately it overshadows this movie
Yeah.
to a certain extent. And this movie I think is, um, it's got some powerful messages to share. And if too many people are focused on like what actor did what, when did they do it, was it on set or whatever,
Hmm.
it's gonna distract you from the purpose of this movie, which
Yes.
is to provide this commentary on traditional gender dynamics, toxic masculinity, incel culture, abusive relationships, like,
Hmm.
you know, progressive society. This, like, things are changing, and this movie is very clearly saying, like, yes, things are changing. We
Yeah.
need to keep up with it.
Hmm. Yeah. So on that note, let's hop into spoilers and talk about the movie more. I'll put down the time code when we're doing that. Cool. So like you said, lots of stuff about toxic masculinity. Lots of stuff about just relationships and incels. Very much
Mhm.
incels, and I'll talk about that more in a second. But
Yes.
yeah, so yeah, you want to start off with these first couple notes and then I'll
Yeah,
do that.
yeah, absolutely. So I mean, the bulk of this movie, if you've seen it, it focuses almost entirely on Alice's struggles. Alice being a Florence Pugh,
Hmm.
and she is the lead of this film, the protagonist. And I mean, it really does focus on like the entire community and like these other women too, but she is the focal point of this film.
Hmm.
Like the male characters, we spend almost no time with them, and whenever they are in the frame, they're really there for like oppressive nature or
Hmm.
exploited nature, but the film, because it spends so much time focusing on the housemaker role, the wife role of this 1950s abode, it really gives our characters a chance to explore traditional female roles, gender exploitation, and just like the male centric nature of traditional society.
Yeah.
And it does a great job with it too. I think it does focus on that a lot, and I think there's opportunities for it to explore other areas, but it just kind of continuously builds as Alice experiences more hallucinations. She notices more things going on that are out of the ordinary, and are making her question, is this really the utopia that it's advertised to be?
Yeah, and and a lot of the gender roles and exploitation stuff, it's like it feels like how 1950s America is typically depicted, at least in media. So it very much, and from the trailer already, something is up. Like it feels like they're not in the real world entirely, even just from the marketing. So it starts making you think like, oh, there's some sort of fantasy 1950s thing going on here, and Alice is starting to see the cracks a little bit. But yeah, so it's not like a bunch of men running around and just constantly beating their wives. It's not that type of abuse. It's more like the subtle manipulations and keeping people in their place, quote unquote, and stuff like that.
Yes. Yeah, there are some fascinating articles that I was reading before we started to record this during my research, and some of them really honed in on a lot of the different messaging in this film, like the idea of like femininity in this film is like it's central to the plot, but these men and these like traditional gender roles are kind of nailing into the heads of like all the females on the at Project Victory, that like females are inherently like inferior to men. Like that's basically what like they're telling them over and over again. Like you're hysterical, like settle down, like he needs like you got to do everything for your husband because he's providing everything for you. And it's like it's just kind of this cycle of just like oppression and just like nailing in this message into their head that it's like you're subservient to your husband,
which is how it was back then too. Like even just hysteria was a very like sexist gender diagnosis back in the day. So
absolutely.
And the idea that we see this a lot in this movie with the doctor, like medical professionals were not necessarily like there to help women. They were there to keep women like docile in service of the men in their life. So we see a lot of that too. In this, it takes it to a whole other fucking level. But
yes, it's kind of insane. But one thing that I really loved about this film, before we go much deeper, is I just wanted to point out Florence Pugh's character's name, Alice. I just really appreciated that they named her Alice, because that feels very akin to Alice's Adventure in Wonderland. And it's just kind of fitting considering the context and the association, and that everything kind of happens in this film. It kind of feels like she's just going down the rabbit hole and down further and further.
Yeah. And speaking of rabbit holes, let's go down one or two.
Yes.
So
I love rabbit holes.
more well-adjusted members of our audience may not be aware about Dr. Jordan Peterson or about incels. Good job, but I'm sorry because that's about to change. Let us, because in marketing this movie, Olivia Wilde referred to Jordan Peterson as king of the incels. And I'd forgotten about that until about halfway through this movie, and I'll get back to that. But she's right. He is. But let's start with what an incel is first, for those who don't know. It is incel is short for involuntarily celibate, and it refers to an online community of sort of disaffected men who self-identify as involuntarily celibate and consider themselves just unable to sexually attract at all. And they use this inability to attract women as like a justification to hate women and attractive men who are able to attract women. And they refer to them as the Chads. They're the enemy. So there's the incel, the Chad, and the woman. And so incel's like, it's actually super fucking dangerous. Because these guys like sometimes will lash out violently in the real world against women or these Chad people. But also they get in these groups and they like keep like it's almost like they're hyping each other up, but hyping each other up to be bigger incels. Like basically reaffirming to each other that you're right. You will never get a girlfriend. You'll never get laid. And they call it, I think, and there's also sui fuel is what they call it. Like they're giving each other reasons to commit suicide. And that is their cope. And to those people, if any of them are happening to listen, I want to say what Hassan, the guy I listen to on Twitch, says a lot. Any guy can be a 7. Anybody can be a 7. Just don't talk about Jordan Peterson to women or anyone. Find a beard shape that works for your face. If you can grow a beard, like think about your haircut a little bit, put some effort into how you dress, like just carry yourself, and then like talk to people like people. It's not like, even if you think you will never attract someone, you will. You just have to behave like a normal person and not talk about how you're an incel to people, and don't bring up Jordan Peterson because that is a turnoff for people. So that's incels.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it is like, it sounds all very silly and stupid, but it's like people are harmed by this. It's a really dangerous ideology and dangerous group of people. But Jordan Peterson, so this guy was a psychology professor at the University of Toronto. Apparently, he was a very entertaining professor because his lectures were just like fucking batshit. Because he'd be talking about psychology, and then he would very like dramatically point out, it's like, and you see this scene in Aladdin is why this is so important, and just start like crying in front of the class at like Disney's Aladdin or something like that. Something because he always he's obsessed with like myth and shit like that. But he was just like this obscure professor for the longest time. Just kind of doing his thing, being a weird psych professor, more or less harmless. People just kind of took his class and were like, that was hilarious, and left. But he rose to fame in, I think, 2016 when he was interviewed at this protest. And the protest was in opposition to Canadian Bill C-16. And what Peterson was protesting was that he said he was worried that people in Canada were going to start getting arrested for accidentally misgendering people in Canada as a result of this bill. So what the bill is, this is all the bill is. It was an amendment to the Canadian Human Rights Act that added gender identity and expression to a list of prohibited groups for discrimination. So basically, it was saying if you discriminate against people based on their gender identity or expression, you are extremely harmless amendment, could only serve to help people. To this date, not a single person has been arrested in Canada for misgendering someone, because of course not. But he kind of blew up because of that in these types of circles, these sort of like anti-SJW circles. If you were online in the like 2010 to like Trump campaign era of the internet, like anti-SJW shit was like the shit of YouTube. Like it was the dominant form of content for a long time. And so he sort of rode that wave to fame and started speaking to disaffected young men about traditional masculinity and his sort of ideal version of masculinity. He has a couple books. They're like self-help books, which apparently, in fairness, the self-help books are more or less fine. But the problem is that's not what he's known for, really. And it's also like an entry point to his content, right? And his other content is very harmful. It's very transphobic, very misogynistic. And so he speaks to people in lectures, on Patreon, on the debate circuit, all this sort of stuff. Sound kind of familiar to this movie as we're going deeper and deeper.
A little bit, yeah. So similar themes there.
Yeah. So he not important to this, but he almost fucking died. Like he drank apple cider or something and it almost killed him. somehow.
fuck?
He and his daughter do like this carnivore diet where they only eat beef and salt, and then he got like a benzo addiction, like a really crippling benzo addiction. And then he's like, okay, I got to get this experiment, which again, also substance dependency is something he preaches against. So he's a hypocrite too. Not that matters as much for this, but he went to Russia for this experimental treatment where they put him in a medically induced coma for like 8 months. And then,
Wow.
yeah. And then this was during COVID too, or while he was in it, COVID started, and his daughter went to visit him, was infected with COVID and got him sick. So he almost died again from that.
Oh my God.
But ever since he's re-entered the sphere, like I think he got like seriously fucked up by all this shit. And I would feel bad for him if he wasn't such a bad person otherwise. But it's like he just starts like bawling, crying at the randomest things. He's like talking, and one of the funniest lines he said was I don't even know what the context one, but he tears up. He's like, it's attack against God for the crime of being. It's
Wow.
oh, he also when Sports Illustrated had that plus size model on the cover a few months ago. Do you remember that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
He retweeted that and was like, sorry, not beautiful. No like forced standard of beauty will ever make me consider this as pretty or something like that. And it's like, dude, why? why are you doing this? And then after that, he attacked Elliot Page and started dead naming him, and talking about how the surgery like mutilated his breasts, and that got him suspended off of Twitter. And then he put out a video saying he would rather die than delete the tweet, and then joined Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire. So that's who this guy is.
So this guy really sounds like the most like moronic little like complex of hypocrisies. Like he's he's against trans people and all that, but then the quote that you just said to me about it's an attack on God for just wanting
he's very
to
religious. He's
but just the hypocrisy I see there is like
he's a hypocrite. Yeah.
All these people are just trying to exist, and you're like, no, go fuck yourself. You're not. You shouldn't be that way.
But he has very traditional views on gender and gender dynamics. Like at one point he was talking to a woman. He's like, and you can do whatever you want for your career, but you have to remember that women have to have a family. So you have to be, and it's like, no, they don't, Jordan. They do not. But but Olivia Wilde referred to him as king of the incels in press for this movie. And I'd forgotten that until like about halfway through the movie. You see Jack in the real world with his like greasy ass hair and his glasses, and he's like leaning in on his computer, listening to some guy talk to him. And I'm like, oh my God, it's like, that's what I picture when I picture a Jordan Peterson fan. And then I was like, oh my God, this movie is about Jordan Peterson.
It all comes into place.
Yeah, I remember that statement from her. I'm like, oh my God, this is just a movie making fun of incels.
Yeah.
Because the whole program, it turns out, is like they can either bring their spouse or partner or just pick a woman and bring her into this shit with them. It's like, that's some incel ass behavior right there.
Yeah, it really is.
And if you want to get a picture of Jordan Peterson just in your mind, think of like an old guy. He's usually really well dressed. He wears suits a lot, which is part of why he's so dangerous, is because like, if you're not really paying attention to what he said, it's like it's really well dressed, like mild mannered man just talking to you from a place of authority. And then he might say something that you agree with. You're like, oh, that makes sense. And then he keeps talking, and like a couple things here and there make sense. And he starts throwing in little shades of misogyny and transphobia here and there. And if you're not aware of the issues already, you might like get hooked in. And then you go down the pipeline. Like that's how it all works, right? The least aggressive people approach you first, and they start seeding these ideas, and then you get pushed down the rabbit hole, and then you're a fucking Nazi. But
God, that's so scary.
Yeah, it is scary. And that's what was happening on YouTube for like the entire 2010s. It's being fixed now because a lot of left-wing creators sort of recognized this and fought back and have basically trounced the alt-right away. But they're kind of resurging in the Obama or in the Biden years, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, I think the alt-right and they're always going to kind of exist in their own way, and even like incels, like I think it's definitely going to be like a culture or a subsection of the culture that's going to be really entrenched in their beliefs for some time, which is everyone kind of deserves the right to believe whatever they want to believe, but if your ideas are based on oppression and subjugation of others, maybe you might want to take a step back and try and gain some perspective.
And dealing with people like incels and people like this is very difficult, because it's like, the saying, it's like you can lead a horse to water, but it's like that, because you can say everything we've said like to an incel, and it won't matter until they are willing to change their behavior and change their outlook. Like, they will always be trapped in this bubble, and there are people trying to keep them there because these people make money off of these people being in this bubble. But I will also say casting. But Jordan Peterson's voice, he sounds like Kermit the Frog if Kermit made you kind of want to leave the room. That's that's a good way to describe it.
I like that.
Yeah, casting Chris Pine as the Peterson figure is pretty flattering to Jordan Peterson, being honest. But in terms of his ideology about like returning to traditional gender roles of masculinity and femininity, it's like setting this thing in a 1950s America where that was very much the case. It seems like that is the world that Peterson and his fans want to return to. So it makes a lot of sense when we find out more about what's going on in this movie.
Well, yeah, and I think the movie is really potent in a lot of its messages, and I think that core one about incel culture and autonomy for genders, and regardless of your gender, or if you even subscribe to that, you are human and you have the right to do what you want to do, within reason. Within reason. But the movie really does kind of use femininity in some interesting ways. I like one of the ways I think that they use it, I was kind of referring to this earlier, was that it's kind of a tool for oppression, even though it is the femininity is associated with females, but within the confines of this society, within the confines of Project Victory, their gender roles are just being reinforced by their relationships with others, but then also the activities that they do. So like they go and they do some dancing, and it's in ballet, and it's in this very restrictive kind of gray room. They're all doing the same motions, it's all symmetrical, they're all just kind of conforming into this kind of restrictive,
like staying in line, sort of.
Exactly, yeah. And they're all doing it the same way. And then at one point in the film, Margaret, who is another wife at Project Victory, who ended up committing suicide, or at least harming herself to a great degree. She, like Florence's character Alice, she sees her reflection when they're doing the ballet, and Margaret tries to break out of the class with her head. And it's because the dance is just a form of oppression and conformity and kind of keeping them together, but those kinds of motifs of oppression and conformity are pretty consistent throughout this film too, like the walls of the house crushing Alice against the glass was, a very kind of obvious one, but like, I think it was just very powerful how those like themes came to light here.
And it's just like it's keeping all the women in line and keeping them busy so they don't think about it too much. And it's like, and their role is very much like, don't ask questions, just leave that to the men. Because and we find out why they don't want them asking questions, but it is very like dismissive of any sort of concern they might have.
There was, bless you.
Thank you.
There was I don't know if you really caught it, but I had kind of like do a little research on it, and it got pointed out to me, but like one of the other wives in the society, she is just perpetually pregnant. She's never
Yeah.
not pregnant. But I think there's like one line in the film where she was talking about like what the kid inside of her, and she was like, "Ooh, I hope it's a boy. I don't want a
Mhm.
girl. Girls are just like too hard." And I think that kind of speaks a little bit to
Mhm.
um, this kind of ingrained idea in their little society that's just being hammered into their heads of like, females are not the same as males.
Mhm.
You need to really want a boy rather than a girl, because a girl's just going to be too hard. There's too much
Uh-huh.
stuff around her. They're just inferior and all that too. But yeah, I thought that was kind of a small little interesting thing.
Yeah. Um, yeah, you said you had a lot of questions coming out of the film. You want to go through some of those?
Yeah, I did. Because I think that this film it delivers on a lot of
Mhm.
things that we're looking for, the aesthetic, commentary, all that stuff. I just think, you know, as I walked out of the theater and like walked home after watching this movie, I just had a lot of questions, and I still do, about a lot of different things in this movie that just weren't
Uh-huh.
answered. And it's not like, you know, these necessarily needed to be answered, but just like there's so many, like, for so much of this movie, they're teasing um the uh
Project Victory.
yeah, they're just teasing Project Victory. They're just like gradually building up this ominous nature around this society. And while they do eventually like communicate that to us, I just think there's some opportunities for them to take it a little bit further, give
Mhm.
us a little bit more information. Like they just didn't share too much with us. Like, like one of the questions I had was, what exactly are the men doing every day? Are they leaving the simulation to take care of their wives? Is that what it is?
Yeah, it does answer that. In
Okay,
the
that
in the
wasn't clear
like
enough to me.
when Harry Styles is signing up for the simulation, it's going through like the terms and conditions of it.
Hmm.
They are leaving the simulation and working in the real world to
Oh,
to make money to pay to stay in the simulation.
that
And
makes more sense.
yeah, and they also have to do like upkeep and make sure their wives' entranced bodies are like being taken care of. So
Yeah,
that's what they're doing. So that
that's
and
strange.
like when he has an outburst, he has one of his outbursts at her, and he's like, "I have to leave here every day, and I hate every minute of it just to make enough money for us to stay here." That's what he's saying too.
Hmm. Yeah,
So they're out in the real world working, which begs the question too. It's like the fucker wasn't able to get a job for like a year. It seems
yeah,
like what is he doing? How did he get a new job? Like, did he get his shit together in order to maintain this fantasy?
exactly.
And it's like, but I think that could be like a plot hole, but I think it's also a touch on the theme of the movie, because it's like if he wanted to get his shit together, he could have, but he didn't, and he kept falling down this like rabbit hole of
Yeah,
self-pity and self-loathing. And because if it's not a flaw in the writing, which I'm leaning towards it not being one actually, then it shows that as soon as he had something he wanted, he could get it, he could get a job, he could figure it out. Um,
yeah,
to pay for this simulation. But
yeah. Well, that's fair. I guess I just didn't read that too much, but some other questions I had were just like, um, you know, how many others know the purpose of the town? Because as far as we know, it's just the men and then Olivia Wilde's character, but I don't
mhm.
know who else knows.
Yeah.
Why, like also like Alice, when she went out to the HQ building and touched it that first time, why didn't she just leave the simulation? And then
Uh-huh.
like at the end of the movie, she goes back and touches it, and it's kind of implied. We don't see her leave the simulation, but it's implied that she gets out.
Mhm.
So it's like, well, why didn't it work the first time? And then like, some other things, just like you just answered one of them, of like, how are people, like how do people survive in this
Mhm.
simulation? But I guess if their male counterparts are taking care of them, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then um, you know now that Frank's wife is in charge at the end, which we'll kind of talk to in a bit too. But like now that she's in charge, what's she gonna do with it? Like
Mhm.
all this other stuff. But I think that there's just like some questions throughout the film that could have just been explained a little bit clearer to me.
Okay.
I'm not always the most observant moviegoer, but I try to be observant. But if
Mhm.
someone like me can miss some things, I think plenty of other people probably miss them too.
Yeah, well, I had a thing too, but the plane I did not understand.
Oh yes, yeah,
I and we'll talk about this more when we're talking about simulation, but and I'm sure it's connected to the little red toy plane that Margaret had that her kid had, but
Yeah.
why that? Is it a hallucination that Alice is seeing and that she saw too? If so, why? It seems like a lot of her hallucinations were triggered by something specific or like someone messing with her in the simulation.
Yeah.
But like, why the plane? Because it would draw her out there. Like, what was the, if was someone doing that or was there intent behind it? Because initially, I think we knew going into the movie that this was like a fake reality of some sort, right? But I thought it was like a place, like a physical location that's like in like a village situation, you know?
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be like The Village, M. Night Shyamalan's The Village.
Yes.
And that would, because it looked like the plane hit like a bubble in the sky, and that's what caused
Yeah.
it to crash. So I thought he had like a fancy high-tech dome or something. But I did assume pretty quickly that the real world was going to be modern day, like The Village. Spoiler alert for that, I guess. But I almost would have preferred it to be a real place too. The simulation part was, it felt unnecessary to me. How did you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the simulation. Um, it like that's kind of where it doesn't live up to expectations for me too. Like they spent all this time like teasing what it could be, what is the ominous nature of this place, and
Mhm.
all that. And I mean, I like a good twist. You know, when I saw The Village, like that was a pretty good twist, and I fortunately had not had it really spoiled for me, so that was really neat
Mhm.
of a twist. But this one is kind of like, you know, I was expecting something different, and you know, it's okay for them to tell their own story, but you know, like I think there's ways that they could have, I don't know, maybe even just different resolutions that they could have explored to,
Mhm.
like, you know, I initially when we were putting our shows together, I kind of felt like the resolution comes out of left field, and it's not
Mhm.
really like we don't get to see that leading up to it. Like, um you know, I was hoping for some more clues throughout, but like, you know, on retrospection, I feel like there are some clues throughout it with the
Mhm.
hallucinations and like the empty eggs that she
The
just
wall,
cracks.
the
Yeah, the
wall closing in on
wall
her.
closing in
Yeah.
on her, which is really interesting. And I think those do kind of clue it in, you know. um but you know, I think there could have been moments where they could have, you know, given us a really big clue that this is a simulation or something a little bit more in line like that. Like, I don't know how you would really do it, but like maybe, you know, some of the men when they need to leave the simulation, like, you know, this is all hypothetical and not at all like how it works in the movie, but like if the men need to leave the simulation, what if their body just kind of stands there, you know, for like a long extended period of time or something, and then they
Mhm.
like snap back into reality and they're like, oh, I'm here. But like, you
Yeah.
know, that doesn't work with the established plot of the movie. So,
Mhm.
but I don't know. How did you feel about the simulation?
It was fine. I would have preferred a real location that's kind of hidden away, but I did also, with the simulation, it works fine for what the movie's doing. I think I did one element of the simulation I thought was kind of funny is the Victory Project and the work itself. It's like, this is a very impressive simulation you built there, and you're deceiving all these people. Maybe come up with a tiny bit better of a lie than what mining progressive materials or something. Is that what they say?
Yeah.
Like you could just say something.
Right. Yeah. You could give any other excuse, like, I'm building a secret doomsday lab for Dr. Evil. And I would have been like, okay, yep, that
Yeah.
checks out.
Or just something that would be more convincing to their wives. It's like, what are you doing? It's like, oh, we're doing like I don't know, like medical research that just requires us to be in this remote facility because if it leaks,
Hmm.
it can be dangerous or something like that. I don't know. Anything that's not mining progressive materials.
Yeah. Oh, and I just thought of something else too. Yeah, the progressive materials is weird, but like, you know, several times throughout the movie, they experience these big shakes, you
Mhm.
know, where
Yeah.
like they have to push the glass and they're like, okay, it's not going to break. Okay, we're fine. That is never fucking explained. Like,
Yeah, it's
is it?
not, but no, but my take on it was that was the people who ran the simulations like detail for the people in it to be like, oh, they must be mining those progressive materials and they're like
I
mining
guess.
real
Yeah.
good. But it's like, I don't know, maybe come up with something else and then you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
But
Well, yeah.
it was making, I think also it was trying to throw us off to where like maybe the men are all doing something really sinister in this location.
Yeah.
And it's causing some like earthquakes to happen or something like that. So maybe it was just meant to be a red herring. That's possible too.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I mean, before we move on from the simulation
Mhm.
discussion, just like just a few other things I'll say about it,
Yeah.
is like, I think this film in some ways, it kind of feels like it thinks it's more clever than it actually is.
Yeah.
Like, I think it definitely delivers on the commentary and on a lot of really strong notes.
Hmm.
But with just like how much stuff was built up with this, um, and I feel like we have similar films like this already existing where there's
Yeah.
like kind of this ominous twist about this town and this woman finds out what the reason is, and it turns out to be something that's like fascinating and ominous and all that stuff.
Hmm.
But I think there's opportunities, and there's like a few too many plot holes here. Like, one other thing that I thought of too was, you know in the real world, Alice is just abruptly leaves her career, at the hospital.
Yeah.
No
No
one's
one.
gonna go like
Yeah. Right.
knock
Yeah.
on her door and try and
Hmm.
figure that out. Like,
Hmm.
but small like little gripes in a film that I think is actually pretty solid though.
Yeah. And I agree. That's a little plot hole, I believe, as well. But and I think you and I both agree with about this on plot holes. Like, if a plot hole exists in service of the theme, then it's okay. Um,
Yes.
like we could do mental gymnastics to solve that. It's like there maybe this Frank guy is so powerful in the real world that he has people who are able to, cover that up in some way. Who knows?
Yeah.
But it is weird. It's like seems like she was working really hard, and
Yeah.
she does it kind of snatch away. But I think on the vein of it being not as smart as it thinks it is, I think Olivia Wilde's like wording about how like some of the things she said in promoting this were just kind of goofy. Like at one point she said, "Men don't come in this film, only women." It's like oh, okay. Sure, man.
That's real on the nose there, but
It's like, wow,
okay.
how feminist of you, Olivia.
Yeah.
But like it's like, okay, this isn't like the idea of targeting incels and Jordan Peterson fans and stuff like that. It's like that is a new angle to take, but this approach to a feminist story is not particularly revolutionary, I don't think.
Yeah, I would kind of agree there.
I like the idea though. I think it's interesting. But I just thought that soundbite in specific was just so goofy.
Yeah.
It's like
That's a good one.
it's one of those things, and it's kind of like it's kind of like when Disney and Lucasfilm started saying like, "Oh, the Force is female now," and then they didn't really live up to that all that much for many years. It's like maybe just don't say that. Hire a bunch of female directors and make a bunch of female-led stories, and then afterward you can say that. But then if
Yeah.
you say it and you don't do anything like that for 5 fucking years, it makes you look ridiculous.
Honestly.
It's a similar thing. And it's like, sure, yeah, I guess we do only see women come in this movie. I guess she's right, but cool.
That was the highlight of my movie, the sex scenes.
Well, and I think Florence Pugh too also felt some frustration about that. It's like,
Yeah.
because so much of the marketing was talking about the fucking sex scenes, and in reality, they're not that big of a part of the movie. There are a few of them, but like,
Yeah.
I don't know. We watch Game of Thrones. Like, sex scenes are a much bigger part of that fucking universe than they were here. So it's
Yeah.
not
Like,
like it's not. I wouldn't say it's a defining feature of the movie. You could take them out, and the movie would be unchanged.
yeah. Well, and one other thing to deviate from sex, as
But
the
why?
choice of entrap. Well, yeah. Why would you ever deviate from sex? But one idea that I thought was very interesting from this film was also the choice of entrapment.
Mhm.
Is what I'm calling it.
Yeah.
Because Alice's character, and I assume the majority of the other female characters in this
Mhm.
movie, are really taken against their will from the
Yeah.
outside world and put into Frank's Project Victory world.
Mhm.
However, Olivia Wilde's character, I believe her name was Bunny,
Mhm.
was not.
Yeah.
She was not taken against her world. She entered Frank's project willingly because she had lost two previous pregnancies or babies. I don't know if they were born or not, but you
Mm.
know, she had lost two previous children, and she wanted to enjoy a world where those kids could actually grow up and she could experience their childhood and everything like that.
Mhm.
So you know, I think her character Bunny found some solace, some comfort in the simulation, and used it as a vehicle to deal with her own grief and loss.
Mhm.
But you know, it is again within the confines of the system, and so she's kind of oppressed into submission of
Oh,
like, you know,
Kevin.
Kevin's tail is here. Of just like, you know, she's still complicit in the entire
Mm.
arrangement. So, you know,
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of an interesting choice to make with her character. And I think, you know, it does beg a little bit of a question of, you know, even if that one person could find some relief or some kind of like meaning from this simulation, does like I think it kind of gives a little bit of legitimacy to the mission of Project Victory. You know, in theory, not saying I agree with it at all.
Well, I for our thoughts on that, you can listen to our 2 episodes about WandaVision from the start of our show, because
Yes.
that's a very similar thing. But I would not. I would one on one note. I would have liked it to be a little bit more clear on if she voluntarily entered the simulation or if she figured it out but was happier and decided to just
Mm,
go with it. Because that
yeah.
was my initial takeaway from it. But I would say Frank's mission, it's not about what she's finding helpful. And even
Yes.
if it was, as we see in WandaVision, like Wanda is dealing with her grief through the simulation, but harming everybody around her. So I would say the same here.
Yeah.
It's
For
not
sure.
like you're supposed to deal with your grief in the real world, in whatever method you choose, but maybe try therapy. That could be helpful.
Yeah. Go to therapy first, and you know, maybe try some drugs, and then you can go
Yeah.
live in a simulation.
But I did think that was an interesting wrinkle. It was, and I'm of two minds about it, because it's like, on the one hand, it was almost necessary for the plot to get Alice kind of moving, or maybe it wasn't. Maybe she would have just run away anyway, but it gave us, the audience, a little bit more information about what the stakes were for the final sequence. But
Yes.
um I could change my mind on this or just be wrong about it, but I almost feel like her voluntarily being there, Bunny, I mean, kind of hurts the theme of the movie a little
Mm,
bit. Like if this is critiquing incel culture, but then one of the an incel is a primarily male community. There may be some fem cells, but I don't think they're as prevalent. But if this movie is about critiquing incel culture and then you have one of the women there like totally cool with it, I think it kind of muddies the waters a little bit in a way. I mean, I think just evidenced by you asking, like, is there some legitimacy to the mission? I think that's a side effect of that element of the plot, and I think maybe that's bad. I don't know though.
no, I get that critique, and I mean, you know, one way that I'll kind of speak to that is maybe, you know, I don't think that every incel or every person who considers himself to be an incel
Mhm.
um, is like 100% down that path. You
Uh-huh.
know, like everyone's kind of. I feel like peer pressure. When there's peer pressure and you're kind of struggling in life,
Mhm.
it's easy to look for excuses as to why. It's easy to blame yourself, and it's easy to listen to others online
Mhm.
and what they have to say about your life, even though they don't know it as much or as well as you do. You're the
Yeah.
only person who understands your life. And so I think, you know, there's there's likely, you know, just how it is with like Democrats and Republicans. You know, there are some Democrats who are all in all the way on the left, and then
Mhm.
there are some Democrats who are like, well, I'm just kind of here because it's the lesser of two evils. And you
Mhm.
know, it's kind of the same way with Republicans, like I'm
So the
here because it's less.
spectrum, basically.
Exactly, it's a
Yeah.
spectrum. And so I think, you know, it's kind of a similar, maybe, you know, I'm just kind of speculating here because I really don't know anything about incel culture, but you know, I assume that there's probably at least some people in that world who are there because they feel like they need to be, because they don't know where else to go, you know.
Right. and they're probably the ones that are easiest to like save because they're on the verge,
Yeah.
right? They like,
Yeah.
and I think that is how a lot of them start. They're just looking for a community or to feel some sort of validation, and they get it from the wrong place, but it still
Yeah.
feels good, so they go deeper.
Yeah. And
No,
so
I
that's
think.
kind of
So do you
that's
think?
just,
Do you think Bunny is that way, or do you think Nick Kroll's character, her husband, is that way? Like, what's the
oh,
parallel you're thinking of?
I don't know. I was just trying to like find a diamond in the rough if I could there,
Okay.
with Olivia Wilde's character, because like
Mhm.
if that is, because that could be something that she's trying to make with that character of like, well, she was there for the plot point to give some more information
Mhm.
for Florence Pugh's character for the climax of the film, but you know, it could also serve a purpose of, you know, some people are here because it's a little bit more complex than we might think, you know.
Yeah.
But
I also would have liked, and there was no time for this, especially at this point in the movie, but I'm like, did she and her husband decide together to come in if
Mhm.
she knew, or did she force him into this? And he's unaware, because he didn't seem like he was unaware. He seemed
Yeah.
like he understood what was going on. But that would have been interesting too if she forced her husband into it. But again,
Yeah.
like I said, it would probably muddy the waters of the theme a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just that little bit adds a lot of conversation to the movie, I think.
It does. Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah. But some miscellaneous stuff. The kitchen scene between Chris Pine and Florence Pugh, I really loved that.
Yes.
I love how it starts without a reveal, and then we get a reveal about a third of the way through. And I thought their performances were really great, especially here. And I liked that Frank was almost excited about having a challenger, someone who's going to push him. I don't know
Mhm.
why. I don't know why he would want that. It seems very counterproductive to him, but it adds a layer to his character. I think that like maybe he's bored with this and wants
Yeah.
something else. But
He's like, I need something greater.
yeah.
Yeah, there's also that I thought it was kind of silly. The triple kill at the end of the film, where she's like driving the car and they're like trying to escape, and there's the two guys chasing her, and the one guy coming towards her,
Yeah.
and she just slams on her brakes, and the guys go together and they all crash in a fiery ball explosion. It's like,
And
you guys could not turn the car like out
well,
of
it was
the
the
way.
last second. It was,
Yeah.
but no, for our audience, like in the theater, I leaned over to Niles and just whispered in the like Halo announcer's voice, like triple kill. I thought that was so funny.
It was excellent, but yeah, I thought
I think
that
it was actually like 5 people, but you know, I didn't remember what he says for 5. Oh, it would be killing spree, but I would have had to do the whole thing. I would have had to go triple kill,
Double kill.
killing spree,
Quadruple kill.
killionaire.
Well, I guess she already had the killing spree with Harry Styles' character.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I would
But
have had
she's
to
up
say
to
more than.
6.
Well, no, too much time. Too much time, because remember, it's in 6 seconds of each other between kills.
True. Yeah.
Too long.
True.
Too long. Harry Styles doesn't count. Her KDR is great though. Like really impressive.
Unbeaten. Unbeaten. But yeah, I thought that was just like a silly scene, but it was also just kind of fun.
I liked it. It was a good time.
Oh yeah, I definitely laughed at it, but I was like, yes, that's okay. Let's keep moving.
It was like an absurd stunt in a movie that had little to no action up until that point. It does kind of escalate. I love when she's running up the ramp at the end, like around the mountain. In my head, I'm like, go up the fucking hill. And then she looks down and all the guys in red are just like running up the hill. I'm like, you do that. Go.
Go. I don't care if you don't have any shoes. Just
You
go.
would have been there by now.
Yeah, that was silly. Yeah, and there's also that one point towards the end of the film where Frank gets just stabbed by his wife.
Yeah.
And she's like, she turns to him and says, "It's my turn now," or something like that. It's like,
yeah.
where the fuck did that come from?
You know what it felt like? It feels like they were actually shit. I don't know if you've seen this movie. I don't want to spoil this movie for you. There is another movie where something very similar happens to a patriarchal male figure in that movie. And it in that movie it's good. In this one, it's very stupid. I think.
It's a
I
little
think
confusing.
there's no setup for it whatsoever. In fact, we're set up for the opposite. It seems like she is
Yes.
super down for everything that's going on here. So
Yeah.
I think that detail was very strange, and I did not like it.
It was like a thing that they like needed to add in like as a last minute thought. They were like, okay, so we're at this point in the film. Shit. Chris Pine's character is still alive. Fuck, what do we do?
Yeah.
Oh my god, it's a story about feminism. Let's kill him with his wife. It'll solve the problem. It's okay.
Frank was killed in the outhouse by the woman.
Yeah.
Or outhouse. That's not what that was. Outhouse is a toilet. In the pool house. Whatever. Yeah, that was the
Close
one.
enough.
I like the ending a lot, except for that one bit because it just felt so strange.
Yes.
And I don't think Frank needed to die by the end of the movie. I think it would have been a better ending if that character was still alive. Because if you think about Alice's story, like her villain isn't Frank, it's Jack, because
Yeah.
he's the one who kidnapped her and forced her into this fake life, and she defeated him already. And she just had to escape from the system that she was stuck in. So, which it seems like she does. So
Yeah, it's kind of overkill, I would say.
yeah.
To do that. But overall, I appreciated this movie. I thought it was a very great watch.
Fun time.
Yeah, strong commentary. The drama is stupid, and you shouldn't really pay attention to it, even though we talked about it a little bit. It was just kind of like one of those freak moments in new releases where all of a sudden there's a shit ton of drama around this film for no fucking reason.
Yeah, it wouldn't even be worth talking about if it didn't just like keep building. Like it just felt like it was never ending, which is what made it entertaining. But yeah, overall I like this movie too. There's a lot coming out soon, so maybe it doesn't need to be top of your list, but it's enjoyable. Check it out at some point,
Yeah,
fun.
Absolutely. Shall we transition to the final part of our episode?
Yeah,
where we talk about other stuff.
I think we should.
Movies, TV shows, games we're playing, books we're reading, all that good stuff. Dylan, what have you been up to lately?
So a while ago, I went to see the re-release of Avatar, James Cameron's Avatar from 2009.
Nice.
I went to the IMAX theater, saw it in IMAX 3D. God damn, the visuals of that movie have not aged a second since it came out. Yeah, it looks spectacular. And I still fucking hate 3D. I will always hate 3D, but I will say this movie does it very well. It's the only movie, or only live action movie at least, that I've ever seen that I would recommend watching in 3D in a theater. At home, if 3D TVs are even a thing, I don't know. But and I liked it overall, just the movie overall. I liked it a lot more than I remembered liking it. I never disliked it or hated it or anything, but I was just kind of like, yeah, it was fine. It was a huge at the time, obviously. But it's a good movie, man. The plot is pretty the plot's pretty boilerplate, but that's acceptable. Yeah, so I watched that. Then I started playing Conan Exiles, which is like a survival crafting game in the Conan the Barbarian universe, which has been kind of fun.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then I've been binging Attack on Titan the last couple weeks.
How do you like that?
I like it a lot. It's a really entertaining show. And I've heard so many things about it because like there are a lot of video essays about how it's super fascist, and the main character definitely is. But I don't know if I won't be able to judge until the story is done. Is the show itself that way, or is it just the main character? Because it's interesting. It's a good show though, but it's like they do live in a super militaristic society and they just like kill all the time. And the main character is like so horny for murder. It's insane.
Interesting. I might need to watch that.
It's anime. It's a very interesting show, but it's like and I'm realizing, and I think Death Note was the same way, or maybe not to this extent though. Thing about animes that I've seen is that there's never a good point to be like, that's a good stopping point for tonight. You know,
Yeah.
it's like, it's always like to be continued. I'm like, fuck you. It's mid scene.
I'm going to continue it now. You
It's
can't
2
control me.
a.m. I have to go to bed.
I know that feeling all
Yeah.
too well.
Yeah, but and I've also been carrying on with Rings of Power, which has its finale this week, which I'm excited for.
Wow.
Yeah, and then House of the Dragon, which last night's episode was so good. It was awesome. Are you caught up on House of the Dragon?
No, I just started it yesterday, so I've only watched the first 3 episodes, getting through it, but it is so interesting. I'm just all in at this point. I'm 3 episodes and I'm like, yep. I don't even need like any other like people to like persuade me to watch this. Like,
Yeah.
I appreciate how similar it is to the original series.
But different as well in a lot of ways.
It's making it very clear this is its own show. The pacing is going to be different. The characters are going to be different. The dynamics are going to be different. Like, it's all going to be its own show, and I'm really, really into it so far.
Yeah. Like almost every episode has some sort of time jump. There's one upcoming that you haven't got to that's 10 years.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and like some of the actors are different actors for major characters. So
that's interesting.
But the scale is so much smaller too. Like Game of Thrones, we're jumping all over the world, all these different families. Yeah. House of Dragon's very contained.
Yeah, it's very much the House of Dragon. Like, it's not focusing on the Baratheons or the Starks or the Dornish people. It's very much the Targaryens, which is very cool. Yeah. I also am caught up on Andor now.
Oh, same. Yeah.
Which is just a phenomenal show. Like, I'm so into it. It's everything I've ever wanted in a Star Wars show. Ever since I was a little kid, I think. So far. Well, you know, with the exception of a lightsaber. But, you know, I'm sure that's like episode like 19 down.
I really hope not. Honestly,
I don't think that they will. It'll, if anything, it'll be like one of those like spear things that the General Grievous's bodyguards had. Like, it'll be something like that. The magma rays or whatever they're fucking called.
I like that the show is so separate from all other Star Wars stuff, though. It's like, and it's connected to Rogue One, sure, but like, whatever. It's still separate enough from that for me. But
yeah, it's really cool.
I just like, The Last Jedi is the last Star Wars project that I found. Actually, aside from the anime, Visions, that's one. Visions and The Last Jedi are the only 2 times Star Wars has felt interesting to me in the last like 6 years. I like The Mandalorian. I even like parts of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan, I guess. But like, it all felt like it was playing in the same sandbox, and this feels like it's something different. Tonally, it's a different scale. We're seeing different elements of things we've seen before. Like the Mon Mothma stuff is very interesting.
Yeah, I want more of that. 10 times
I think
more
we're
of
gonna
that.
I think we are going to see the Senate chamber. At some point. It's in the trailer, and I'm like, because that was a sad thing for me about the Star Wars prequels, is that dealing with the politics of the Star Wars world, that is interesting. It's just George didn't do a good job, so it was boring. But like, seeing a senator who is supporting the rebellion navigate the perils of being in the Imperial Senate, that's really cool. That's really interesting.
Into it. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
it's a very neat show so far. Maybe that'll be an episode we have in the future.
I'm sure it will be.
Yeah, and then one other thing, I just watched the movie Crimson Peak
with Tom Hiddleston, right?
Yes, with Loki. I was like, what is that trickster Loki up to now? What's he doing in here? But he's not Loki. It's not an alternate version from the MCU. No, it's actually Tom Hiddleston playing a ghost. Well, not a ghost. He becomes a ghost. Spoilers. But it's a very fun like ghost story set in a, you know, historical time period. And I think it was Guillermo del Toro, if I remember right.
I think you're right.
directed it, but it's really cool stylized. It's like a ghost story with a love story. It's
Fun.
really fucking cool. There's plot holes, of course, but it's still a fun time, and it got me in the mood for spooky season.
Yeah.
So yeah, so-
Speaking of MCU, actually, I forgot. She-Hulk, I've been watching that still. And then
oh
Werewolf
yes,
by Night.
I forgot
Marvel
about
and
that
spooky.
too.
It's so fun. I
It's
liked it a lot.
amazing. Yeah, Werewolf
It's
by Night
great.
was amazing. It's like, yes, give me more of that fucking kind of content that is just original and experimental
Yeah.
like that. It's
I
so
mean, it's
cool.
like it's the sets and the shots and everything are like in the style of the really, really, really old monster movies.
Yes.
And it just is great. It's so fun.
Yes, it's
Such a
definitely
creative
worth the
idea.
rewatch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and a great little Halloween watch. It's not scary, but it's meant to be
it's
watched around Halloween for sure.
it
But
was a little bit more violent than I was expecting, but
Mhm.
I'm not complaining at all.
yeah, that might be part of why they did it in black and white, so they could get away with that. Because I
Yeah.
don't know if you knew this, but I think if I was told correctly, at the end of Kill Bill Volume 1, where she just slices through like 150 people, and the movie goes to black and white for a little bit during that scene.
Yeah.
Apparently they made Tarantino do that. I don't know if that's true. That could have just been him wanting to. But no, I like Werewolf by Night, and like we've been saying for forever, Marvel has brand power now, too much brand power, but it's like use that to do interesting shit more than not,
Absolutely.
so
Very
more
into
people
it.
should watch that. But
Yes, please do. Go watch it. And if you haven't watched Don't Worry, Darling, go check that out as well.
mhm.
We will be back in 2 weeks' time with another episode of Play, Pause, Rewind. Until then, Dylan, where can people follow you online?
On Twitter at D-Day Movies, on Instagram at DylanD1026, on YouTube at D-Day Movies, and on Twitch at D-Day_movies. Niles, where can people find you online?
Follow me on Instagram at Niles Got No Styles. But yes, thank you all so much for watching and listening. We greatly appreciate everyone who tunes into these episodes. We have a lot of fun making them. So we hope you guys have a lot of fun tuning in and listening to us talk about movie stuff, TV show stuff, all that stuff. If you got the time, please leave us a review or share with your friends. It gives us a nice bump, and any people that will listen to this, we'll take them for listeners. So
Indeed. Yeah.
But again,
All
thank you
right.
so much. We will see you guys soon.
All right. Peace out, guys. Bye.
Bye.